The Ouse Valley Way, 150 miles from Searisham to King's Lynn, between March 2011 and October 2020. Oozing along the Ouse. The Ouse Valley Way is a source-to-sea trail running along one of England's longest rivers. It follows the Great Ouse as it meanders from its source near Searisham in Buckinghamshire to King's Lynn and the Wash. On its course, it passes through the rolling Buckinghamshire countryside to reach extensive areas of low-lying wetlands and the black-soiled fens, which now lie around 10 feet below the elevated river banks. It passes through a number of towns such as Buckingham, Milton Keynes, Newport Pagnell, Bedford, St Neots, Huntingdon, St Ives, Ely and Downham Market, as well as numerous villages. After Erith, where the Dutch engineer Bermudan worked to shorten the river across the 100-foot washes, the way continues along the Old West River, where the Streatham Old Engine tells the story of the draining of the fens. Before Ely, with its cathedral visible on the skyline for many miles around, it meets the River Cam. After Ely, the trail runs in common with the Fen Rivers Way, crossing the Bedford level to Downham Market and King's Lynn, where the Ouse finally flows out into the Wash. The trail provides a blend of riverside and canal walking, sections alongside old gravel pits, which have now been transformed into nature reserves, and gentle countryside with very few climbs. Some stretches leave the river to avoid areas prone to flooding during the winter. Some nerdy facts. There are 22 locks on the Great Ouse and its tributaries. The Great Ouse is the 5th longest river in the UK. Historically, the Great Ouse has been important for fenland drainage and commercial traffic. The name Ouse is derived from an old Celtic word meaning slow-moving river. Over the years, the river has undergone extensive modification and rechanneling in order to relieve flooding and facilitate better navigation. The river is tidal up as far as the Denver Sluice and navigable between Bedford and the Wash. The River Great Ouse should not be confused with 3 other rivers in England with the same name. In other words, the River Ouse in Yorkshire, the River Ouse in West and East Sussex, and the River Little Ouse, which flows from the Norfolk-Suffolk border to join the Great Ouse at Littleport. In October 2020, following my extensive explorations over the years of footpaths in my local area and in the fens, I finally finished walking the Ouse Valley Way, a project that had been 10 years in the walking. I walked my first stage on a local walk way back in March 2011, and it never occurred to me then that I would one day walk the whole trail. In fact, the possibility of bagging the whole thing only started to dawn on me in 2020, when I suddenly realised that I had walked many of the stages between Bedford and King's Lynn in connection with other walks. See the Fen Rivers Way, the Rothschild Way, and the Pathfinder Way. Suddenly, I became aware that completing the entire course was within my grasp, and I embarked on a crusade to finish the job. A few more local walks filled in some of the missing links, and then I made a concerted effort to walk the western reaches from the source to Bedford. My son Alex joined me on the first stage from Searisham to Buckingham, but otherwise I walked the entire trail on my own. Stage 1, Searisham to Buckingham, 7.5 miles. Here we are at the start of the Ouse Valley Way in Searisham, Northamptonshire. Our first sighting of the mighty River Great Ouse, slightly less than 1 mile south of Searisham. We almost got lost in this huge field of maize between Searisham and Stowe, where I was imagining being chased by aliens. Pet alpaca transport on the Searisham to Stowe stage. Stowe School, an independent school for boys and girls aged 13 to 18. One of its most notable alumni is Sir Richard Branson. The temple in Stowe Park, which is run by the National Trust. The Corinthian Arch at Stowe. Buckingham Old Jail, built in 1748, and a well-earned cup of coffee. Stage 2, Buckingham to Stony Stratford, 10.5 miles. The Buckingham arm of the Grand Union Canal, now overgrown. Some sections are currently under restoration, and plans are afoot to complete the entire project for future generations. It was a hot day. The River Ouse on the approach to Stony Stratford. Stony Stratford Nature Reserve. Stage 3, Stony Stratford to Newport Pagnell, 10 miles. I saw a heron on the far river bank as I was leaving Stony Stratford. Footpath tunnel under the Grand Union Canal at Wolverton. Grand Union Canal, aqueduct over the River Ouse at Wolverton. Grand Union Canal, Wolverton. The Ouse Valley Way runs alongside the Grand Union Canal for 2 miles in northern Milton Keynes. Ruins of St Stephen's Church near Linford Lakes between Milton Keynes and Newport Pagnell. Stage 4, Newport Pagnell to Olney, 8.5 miles. Newport Pagnell High Street. Crossing the River Ouse just outside Newport Pagnell. The River Ouse runs through Emberton Country Park, here at Grebe Lake, just outside Olney. The Sluice at Olney. Arriving in Olney, the home of the Cowper and Newton Museum, which features the work of Olney residents William Cowper, an 18th century poet, and his friend, the Reverend John Newton, who wrote the hymn Amazing Grace. Stage 5, Olney to Harold, 7 miles, plus 4 miles to include a diversion between Olney and Cold Brayfield. Leaving Olney. Flooding in the area stopped me in my tracks, and I had to keep backtracking to fight my way through. This is the footpath leaving Olney, where I managed to keep my feet dry by doing acrobatic contortions on the fence. My path between Olney and Clifton Rains, which necessitated a lengthy diversion. Grr! Again! This is what met me at Newton Blossomville, and involved another lengthy diversion. Scene in Newton Blossomville. The Ouse in flood, seen from Turvey Bridge, with Turvey House in the background. A dry spot for my feet at last at Turvey Church, with its beautifully clipped yew hedge. Oh no! More flooding at Harold Bridge, but luckily this time I was able to cross the river on the raised footpath. Cars were less fortunate. Stage 6, Harold to Steventon via Sharnbrook, 10 miles. The first part of this stage runs through the lovely Harold Odell Country Park. But where were those otters hiding? The otter network must have got wind of my impending arrival and told them I was coming. The Harold Odell Country Park. The bell at Odell. That has a rather nice onomatopoeic ring to it, doesn't it? It welcomes walkers. They might have changed their mind if I had set foot inside, because I was caked in mud from head to toe. Lovely house in Odell. Borage on the Odell to Sharnbrook stage. Borage, an anti-inflammatory and tonic herb, acts as a restorative agent on the adrenal cortex and is thus able to revive and restore the adrenal glands after cortisone and steroid treatment. The Ouse at Sharnbrook. Pavenham. And Pavenham again. The Pavenham to Steventon stage, just before I went swimming in a sea of foul-smelling mud which had been left behind by recent flooding. It took me hours to clean my gear afterwards. The perpetrators of the stinky mud. Innocent-looking perpetrators. The Holy Well below Steventon Church. This was a very peaceful spot, reminiscent of the Chalice Well in Glastonbury. Stage 7, Steventon to Bedford, 8 miles. Steventon Windmill and a lone tree. Lovely house in Bromham. The Ouse seen from Bromham Bridge. Swans on the Ouse as I entered Bedford. Stage 8, Bedford to St Neots, 16 miles. Neolithic mortuary in the Bedford River Valley Park, west of Willington, by the A421. The Ouse Valley Way, just outside Barford. Roxton Lock. Stage 9, St Neots to Godmanchester, 10 miles. The Ouse, just outside St Neots in Little Paxton. This was my very first section, which I walked in March 2011. Stage 10, Godmanchester to St Ives, 6 miles. Wintry trail between Godmanchester and Houghton on a bitterly cold day in January 2020. Stage 11, St Ives to Erith, 6 miles. Houghton Mill, where the Ouse Valley Way crosses the Pathfinder Way. Holy Well, east of St Ives. Like the Holy Well at Steventon, this was another very special place which had similar energy to that found at Chalice Well in Glastonbury. Holy Well Church. Stage 12, Erith to Aldreth, 4 miles. The River Ouse as it crosses under the Aldreth Causeway, one of 3 ancient causeways which used to run across the swamps and marshes to the Isle of Ely. See the chapter entitled Hikes on Dykes for more information about this. The crossing point of the Ouse Valley Way and the Aldreth Causeway. Stage 13, Aldreth to the 20 pence Marina, 4 miles. The Streatham Old Engine, which is the last survivor of over 100 steam-powered pumping stations that were used for draining the fens in the 19th and early 20th centuries. One of the off-duty guides just happened to be sitting outside as I walked past, and he very kindly offered to give me a private guided tour to satisfy my curiosity. Stage 14, 20 pence Marina to Ely, 8 miles. Convergence of the rivers Ouse and Cam at the Fish and Duck Marina just to the east of Streatham. The Ouse Valley Way and the Rothschild Way run in parallel between Brownshill Lock, although sometimes on opposite sides of the river. Brownshill Lock, which is located between Holywell and Erith, is the crossing point of 3 trails: the Ouse Valley Way, the Pathfinder Way, and the Rothschild Way. See the Pathfinder Way for a photo. Stages 15 to 17. See the chapter on the Fen Rivers Way for these 3 stages, because from Ely onwards the Ouse Valley Way and the Fen Rivers Way run in parallel all the way to the coast at King's Lynn, albeit sometimes on opposite sides of the river. The stages are Ely to Littleport, 5 miles, Littleport to Downham Market, 12 miles, Downham Market to King's Lynn, 12 miles. The end of my riverside journey on the quay in King's Lynn. Lessons learnt. This trail isn't called the Ouse Valley Way for nothing, because oozing is exactly what I did along some of the stages which are prone to flooding and are rather boggy, especially during the winter months. Thanks to improved water quality and river management, otters have returned to live in the Ouse. But I'm still waiting to see one in the wild. Seals have been seen as far upstream as Bedford.